What's up, Taiwan? I'm Rik Glauert with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Taiwan and the US have held a first round of tariff talks. That's according to Taiwan's cabinet. Taiwan is hoping to avoid a potential 32% tariff on its goods by the Trump administration. The two sides discussed other economic and trade issues in the video call. Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te previously said he received a positive response from Washington on his plan to boost procurement from and investment in the United States. Japan says that peace in the Taiwan Strait is not only important for the country's security, but is also a cornerstone of global security. Those comments come from Tokyo's annual diplomatic Blue Book, which looks at how Japan will engage with countries in the region to promote security. One section of the report touches on China's recent large-scale military drills, which Japan labels as coercive and intimidating maneuvers. The report also says Japan should work more with the US to increase defense spending and to take more active measures to prevent a conflict in the region. To learn more about how Japan is viewing its security environment, Jaime Ocon spoke to Robert Ward. He's the Director of Geoeconomics and Strategy at the International Institute for Strategic Studies based in London.
When we look at how Japan is talking about security around Taiwan, has that approach changed at all?
If you look at, for example, the G7 communique after the Hiroshima summit in 2023, they also talk about the importance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait and the importance of that for the international community. And why that's important for Japan is because Japan wants the issue to be seen as a global issue. And why that's important is because Japan wants lots of other countries also to be interested in preserving the status quo, so preserving stability in the region. So this is part of Japan's attempt to create strategic complexity in the region for China, but also to sort of cross-brace, if you like, its own security interests and that of the US in stability.
Let's say that there was a conflict around Taiwan. How would Japan be affected?
If there was a contingency in Taiwan, Japan would be one of the major geopolitical losers, probably globally, obviously, apart from Taiwan. Japan is sits so close to Taiwan, Yonaguni Island, the westernmost island of Japan, sits 100 kilometers or so away from Taiwan. You can see Taiwan from Japanese territory on a clear day. So really, really important for Japan, given the volatility coming from the US at the moment. The task here has perhaps got a bit more difficult for Japan. So Japan's trying to increase its agency within its security treaty relationship with the US to show that it's pulling its weight, to show that it's spending more money on defense and so on. So that is the core of Japan's strategic posture on Taiwan. But then it's seeking to supplement this core with trying to get other countries with Indo-Pacific interests interested in the region and interested in this issue. So it's quite ambitious.
We recently saw the U.S. Secretary of State, Pete Hegseth, visit Japan, and he's really pushing for countries to spend more on their defense. How do you think relations between the United States and Japan will change under this new Trump administration?
So I think one important thing to remember is Japan has always been under pressure from the US to spend more on defense, whether it's President Nixon, whether it's President Carter, Reagan, and so on. This has been a steady thing. And since 2022, when Japan really did to produce an about turn in its defense policy, Japan has been, I think, doing quite a lot to make good on what the US has been asking it to do. Not just because the US wants it to spend more, by the way, but also because Japan itself recognizes that its role in preserving stability in the region has also changed. SecDef Hegseth's visit to Japan, that was also, I think, went quite well. Hegseth used some language about lethality and so on that some in Tokyo may have found a little bit bracing, but overall I think the direction was good.
That was Robert Ward from the International Institute for Strategic Studies based in London. Former South Korean President Yoon is now back in his private home after being removed from office. Hundreds of supporters were seen waiting and cheering outside his home. Last week, South Korea's Constitutional Court upheld Yoon's impeachment, which put an end to 4 months of constitutional turmoil after an attempt to impose martial law in December. Security officials say that as many as 50 security personnel will be deployed to guard Yoon and his wife, who are entitled to protection for at least 5 years. With former President Yoon Suk-yeol now officially removed from office and South Korea facing a snap presidential election on June the 3rd, this chapter of great political turmoil in the country appears to be coming to an end. Alec MacDonald spoke with Hyung-Moon Hwang, a professor of Korean history at the Australian National University, to discuss what this tumultuous period means for the country's relatively young democracy.
Now that the Constitutional Court has upheld the impeachment of Yoon Suk-yeol, what has immediate fallout and reaction been in Korea?
There appear to be two main topics of discussion that have dominated over the weekend. The first is to figure out why it took so long for the Constitutional Court to come to this verdict. I think the general sentiment was that, at least for those who supported the verdict, the ruling not only was correct, but that the expression of the justification for the ruling was done very well. It was done in plain language. It was done very clearly in condemning the coup attempt, in condemning what was expressed as a betrayal of the people's trust.
So do you think that it was a matter of the court ensuring that they got the correct language? Was there security concerns? Or is it a bit of both, that they want to make sure that their ruling was legally beyond a shadow of a doubt so that this case would be clear-cut over?
I think that last point is probably one of the major considerations that went into this. I noticed in the coverage of the verdict immediately afterwards that as much as there was a sense of incredible relief and celebration among those who supported the verdict, they also celebrated the 8-0 unanimous ruling, and that suggested that whatever disagreements there might have been over the finer points, that fundamentally this was a clear-cut case. And so it was almost like a sporting event, like as if Korea was in the World Cup and people were celebrating the outcome in victory, but also counting the score. I think that testifies to the extent to which perhaps the Constitutional Court justices wanted to present this united front, and there might have been some dealing going on among them in order to come to the expression of this unanimous ruling by addressing some of the finer points and maybe even objections from some of the conservative justices. So that, I think, will take more time to flesh out what exactly happened in the negotiations or the discussions among the justices to achieve this final result.
Moving to the lessons that can be learned from this, Taiwan shares a similar authoritarian past under the Kuomintang, and there are certain shadows of the past which both play into Korea's current politics and Taiwan's current politics. What lessons can other democracies, namely Taiwan, learn from what Korea has experienced over the past 4 months?
The parallels are really striking because both South Korea and Taiwan emerged in the midst of the reckoning of the Pacific War of the 1940s. And so immediately thereafter, in both China and Korea, there was a civil war that aligned the communists with the capitalists, or anti-communists, if you want to call them. And those groups, respectively, were heavily aligned with and controlled by the geopolitical powers, namely the Soviet Union and or China on the communist side, and the U.S. on the non-communist side. And just as South Korea had to endure a long period of post-war right-wing authoritarian militarist dictatorship, of course, Taiwan had to do the same. I think the South Korean case and the Yoon coup attempt demonstrates that not only is a constant vigilance demanded in order to uphold a democracy, but a recurring consideration of the legacy of the past in the respective countries has to be strong and persistent, whether it's in the education system or in the open discussions of the political arenas, in order to acknowledge that there's always this possibility that the militarist authoritarian past can make a comeback depending on the circumstances. And the circumstances might simply amount to just a very bad leader who is inclined toward authoritarian rule, as in South Korea, has just emerged. And so, that's something that we have to figure out, whether this is structural in South Korea or whether it was just this one crazy man supported by some crazy people who thought that this was okay.
Korea has elections coming up soon. Taiwan faces a multitude of challenges right now. What can be done to make democracy more resilient? What can be done to help aid the vigilance that we heed towards democracy?
I'm not an expert on Taiwan, but my perspective on Taiwan would suggest that I think Taiwan is probably in better shape than South Korea. But of course, that means simply that the people of Taiwan have to still work at strengthening the democracy. And that's the case for all democracies around the world. Well, globally, it seems there is a lot to gain from a kind of regional connection or a sense of regional alliance here in East Asia among the democracies. And I should say not only in East Asia, but the Asia Pacific. An open discourse, I think, is really important to acknowledge the dangers and shadows of the past in specific countries and to see how in a democracy you can prevent this phenomenon that's universal around the world, and that is a person who is dictatorial in orientation from gaining power.
That was Professor of Korean History Kyung-Mun Hwang. You can watch the full interview with him on Zoom In, Zoom Out by visiting our website or YouTube channel. In Bangkok, a 9-year-old boy is trying his hand at creating body art. The young tattooist is making his public debut, and his father hopes the craft will help his son avoid some of the traps of modern childhood. Joyce Zeng reports.
Elaborate fanged serpent is not the work of a veteran tattoo artist, but of 9-year-old Napat Mitmakon. He's debuting on the tattoo scene at a body art expo in Bangkok, where one of his first customers is his uncle.
ก่อนที่จะมาให้สักคือเราเห็นเขาสักมาแล้วสักมาเยอะแล้วก็เลยไว้ใจให้มาสัก
Keeping his hands steady, Napat calmly draws with the tattoo machine, something he picked up to deal with a common problem among modern kids, spending too much time on his phone.
ตอนนั้นแบตหมดไม่รู้ว่าจะทำอะไรก็เลยเห็นพ่อนั่งฝึกสักอยู่ผมก็เลยขอพ่อสักครับ
An amateur tattooist himself, Napat's father, Natawut Sangtong, was eager to get his son off his phone, but says he did not have to force Napat to get into tattoo art. His son would practice for hours on his own, first learning from TikTok tutorials, then practicing designs with his father on paper, before moving on to artificial leather and then human skin.
สักมันไม่ใช่แค่สักครับมันยังมีการวาดรูปฝึกวาดรูปเพื่อฝึกสมาธิไปด้วยครับผม
For now, Napat tattoos for his family and friends. His father says accepting other customers would need more rigorous training. Napat showing nothing but excitement for the future of his craft.
ไม่ค่อยยากครับไม่ชอบด้วย
Although he's just one of almost 200 artists at this expo, Napat is already standing out and gaining some fans, admiring his precision and fearless mastery of body art. Ryan Wu and Joyce Sin for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally today, take a look at this cute capybara cafe in Florida. I'm Rik Glauert, take care, and we will see you next time.